Welcome to the deep dive, where we really get into one topic and explore it in depth. Today, we're diving into a true crime mystery that's haunted Detroit for decades, the Bigfoot Killer. So picture this, 1975, the Cass Corridor neighborhood, a place known for its struggles with poverty and crime. Over 8 long months, a string of murders terrorized the area. Each victim, a woman between the ages of 16 and 43.
It's a case that's as intriguing as it is tragic. The victims, they were all engaged in sex work and facing immense hardship. Sadly, their circumstances made them incredibly vulnerable. What's particularly striking is the killer's nickname, Bigfoot.
Yeah, that really jumped out at me too. Witnesses described him as a tall, muscular African-American man, likely in his 30s, with facial hair and an afro. But it was his unusually large hands and feet that earned him that chilling moniker. Almost sounds like something out of a horror movie.
There's speculation that he might have suffered from acromegaly, a hormonal disorder that can cause the enlargement of hands and feet. But it's more than just a physical detail. Acromegaly can also lead to psychological changes, including increased aggression. If the killer did have this condition, it could offer a glimpse into the forces driving his horrific acts.
So we have this imposing figure, possibly driven by a medical condition that, we're only speculating about, preying on women on the margins of society. And his methods were brutal. He would lure them with promises of money. Then once he had them isolated, he'd use a knife, violence, and ultimately strangulation. This wasn't just about taking a life. There was a level of rage involved that's truly disturbing.
Absolutely. The level of violence speaks to a deeper psychological complexity. And there's another detail that adds to the puzzle. Witnesses reported seeing him driving a beige Oldsmobile.
A beige Oldsmobile.
Yeah, imagine that. A seemingly ordinary car, a beige Oldsmobile now forever linked to this terrifying string of crimes.
It's chilling. And amidst the fear and the investigation, there was a growing unease within the Cass Corridor community. They felt like the police weren't doing enough to protect these women, almost as if their lives were considered less valuable because of their circumstances.
You're right. There was a real sense that the victims were being overlooked because of their social standing. In late 1975, activists and residents organized a rally demanding justice and accusing the police of negligence. One of their main points of contention was a police leaflet circulated to help identify the killer.
Okay, a leaflet meant to help catch a killer. Seems like a good thing. What was the problem with it?
Well, the contact number on the leaflet wasn't even available at night. Imagine the frustration. You're living in fear, trying to do your part, and the very resource meant to help you is useless during the hours when the killer was most active. It fueled a sense of distrust and added to the feeling that the police were not truly committed to solving these crimes.
The police, of course, denied these accusations, but it highlights a tension that sadly is still relevant today. The divide between law enforcement and marginalized communities. Makes you wonder how differently the investigation might have unfolded if the victims had been from a different social background.
It's a crucial point. The social context of the crimes, the era, the attitudes towards sex workers, and poverty. All of it played a role in how the case was perceived and investigated. This wasn't just a hunt for a killer, it was a collision of social forces, a tragedy that exposed the fault lines within society itself.
So we have this tense atmosphere, a community on edge, and a killer who seems to vanish into thin air after each horrific act. Did the police ever get any solid leads in the case?
Well, there was a development in early 1976 that seemed promising at first. A man named Carl Mayweather Jr. was arrested for attempted rape in a nearby town. He matched the general description of the Bigfoot Killer, tall, muscular, African-American, and he had a history of violence against women.
Mayweather. Seems like an unlikely suspect, given what you mentioned earlier about the social dynamics at play. Was there anything else about him that made him stand out to investigators?
What's intriguing is that Mayweather came from a wealthy family and had a respectable job. He wasn't someone you'd typically associate with the grim realities of the Cass Corridor.
Right.
But the police couldn't ignore the similarities, so they dug deeper, hoping they had finally found their man.
And what did they find? Did Mayweather turn out to be the Bigfoot killer they had been searching for?
Well, as it turned out, Mayweather had alibis for at least 4 of the murders.
Oh, wow.
His family and employer provided statements confirming his whereabouts during those times, effectively ruling him out as a suspect.
So back to square one.
Yeah.
So the Bigfoot killer, despite the terror he inflicted, despite the leads the police followed, was never caught.
That's right. The case went cold, leaving a trail of unanswered questions, and a community scarred by loss and the chilling knowledge that the killer was never brought to justice. We have the names of the victims: Valinda Brown, Julie Brown, Regina Fauci, Naomi Hall, Eoria Dick, Andrea Coxton, and Dorothy Holmes. 7 women, each with their own story, their own dreams, their own loved ones left to grieve.
It's a stark reminder that behind the headlines and the mystery, there are real people whose lives were cut short. It's easy to get lost in the details of the investigation, but we can't forget the human cost of these crimes.
Exactly. These weren't just statistics in a police report. These were individuals whose lives mattered. And the fact that the case remains unsolved adds another layer of tragedy. It's as if their stories were abruptly cut off, leaving a void of unanswered questions.
Did the killings just stop as suddenly as they began? Was there any indication of why the Bigfoot killer just disappeared?
That's one of the most unsettling aspects of this case. The murders ended as abruptly as they started, with no explanation, no final act, no closure for the families or the community. It's almost as if he simply vanished into the shadows.
It's a haunting thought. What do you think, from your perspective, is the most enduring legacy of the Bigfoot killer case? What lessons can we draw from it all these years later? It's unsettling to think that a case like this, with so much terror and so many lives lost, could just go cold. What do you think, from your perspective, is the most enduring legacy of the Bigfoot killer case? What lessons can we draw from it all these years later?
Well, it's a case that forces us to confront, uncomfortable truths about our society. The Bigfoot killer targeted vulnerable women,
Yeah.
women who were often overlooked and marginalized. Their lives, their stories didn't seem to hold the same weight as others. And that's a pattern we see repeated throughout history, even today.
Yeah, you're right. It makes you question whose stories get told, whose lives are deemed worthy of attention and justice. It's a sobering thought, especially in the context of true crime, where the focus is often on the killer, the mystery, the puzzle to be solved. But we can't lose sight of the victims, the human beings, at the heart of these tragedies.
Absolutely. And beyond the individual victims, the Bigfoot killer case reminds us of the systemic issues that contribute to violence and inequality. Poverty, addiction, lack of opportunity. These are all factors that create vulnerability. And when those in power fail to address these issues, it creates a breeding ground for exploitation and tragedy.
It makes you wonder if things could have been different, if there had been more support for these women, if the police had been more responsive to the community's concerns. Could these murders have been prevented?
It's impossible to say for sure, but it's a question worth asking. The Bigfoot killer case is a stark reminder that justice is not always evenly distributed. It's a call to action to address the systemic inequalities that make certain groups more vulnerable to violence and to demand better from those in positions of power.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening and honestly pretty disturbing. But I think it's important to confront these difficult stories, to learn from them, and to use them as a catalyst for positive change. We can't let the victims be forgotten, and we can't let the lessons of this case fade away.
I agree. It's easy to dismiss this as a case from another era, a dark chapter of Detroit's history. But the issues it raises, the vulnerabilities it exposes, these are still relevant today. We have a responsibility to remember, to learn, and to work towards a future where tragedies like this are not just investigated, but prevented.
That's a powerful thought, and for all of you listening, I want to leave you with this. Don't let the Bigfoot killer be just another unsolved case that fades into obscurity. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and keep pushing for a world where everyone, regardless of their circumstances, can live with dignity and safety. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.